My parents banned me from their anniversary dinner. They said the restaurant was too full, that it had to be intimate. A few hours later, my sister posted a photo under warm golden lights. Champagne raised, everyone smiling like a perfect postcard. The caption said, "Family only." I stared at it, felt my stomach drop, then I hit like and typed one sentence: "Congrats, mortgage and taxes are all yours now." 5 minutes later, the post vanished, and my phone lit up with 30 missed calls. Not one asked if I was okay. They only wanted control back. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, you already know how this feels. My name is Zeph, and I'm about to tell you what really happened and what I found hiding behind that family photo. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you're here with me and listening. Comment hi, or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. And if you want more real stories about family betrayal and finally choosing yourself, please subscribe. It helps this channel reach the people who need it most. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. When people hear I'm an architect in Denver, they picture clean renderings and glass towers and some kind of calm control. The truth is, I spend most of my days fixing problems that show up without warning, the kind you don't see in the final photos. A supplier sends the wrong gauge steel. A subcontractor misses a measurement. A schedule slips by half an hour, and suddenly the entire day is a domino line. I'm good at it not because I'm loud, but because I don't panic. I take a breath, I look at what's real, and I solve what's in front of me. That's been my whole life, honestly. That morning, I was standing in a half-finished lobby with my hard hat tucked under one arm, listening to a foreman explain why a delivery had been rerouted to the wrong site. I wasn't even angry. I just stared at the paperwork, asked 2 short questions, and started making calls. Fix the routing. Get the truck turned around. Push the install crew back an hour. Make it work. While I was doing that, my phone buzzed in my pocket, one of those quiet vibrations that usually means a calendar reminder or a bank notification. I ignored it until I had the crew moving again, until the problem was contained the way I like things contained. When I finally looked, it wasn't a work alert. It was my bank mortgage payment processed, escrow transfer scheduled, property tax estimate adjusted. The same line items, the same clean little confirmation like a metronome I didn't remember setting. Except I did remember setting it. I had set it 3 years ago, back when my parents' temporary rough patch was still supposed to be temporary. Back when I told myself I'd help them get their footing again and then everything would even out. 3 years later, my account still released that money like it belonged to someone else. Like my role in the family wasn't a son, but a monthly function. My name is Beck Calder. Most people call me Zeph. I'm 31. I live in a small apartment in Denver that I keep neat because clutter makes me feel like I'm losing control. My parents, Darlene and Hank Calder, live in Charleston, South Carolina, in the same house I grew up in. The house that still has my mother's landscaping and my father's old tools in the garage and the kind of front porch that looks good in photos. It's the house that exists right now because the mortgage and the taxes keep getting paid. By me. I didn't start paying because I wanted leverage. I started because I didn't want them to lose the house. That's what a decent kid does, right? You help. You show up. You handle things. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was loyalty. I told myself that if I was reliable enough, if I made their lives stable enough, they'd finally look at me like I mattered beyond what I could provide. But my family has a pattern, and it's simple. When something breaks, my phone lights up. When nothing breaks, I disappear. The calls always come packaged like small talk. How's Denver? How's work? Are you eating enough? And then the real reason arrives like a hand sliding across a table. The roof needs patching. The HOA raised the fees again. The property taxes jumped, can you cover the difference? The insurance premium is due and it's just a little more than we expected. My mother has a way of saying those words just a little, as if making it smaller makes it less real. No one calls to ask how my week is going and actually waits for the answer. No one calls to tell me they're proud of me. No one calls just to hear my voice. Not unless there's a number attached. I didn't always see it. Or maybe I saw it and trained myself not to. Growing up, my sister Maris was the one the house revolved around. She could bring home a mediocre art project and my mom would put it on the fridge like it belonged in a gallery. If Maris sang in a school recital, the whole family showed up with cameras. If she cried, the atmosphere in the house shifted around her like weather. I learned early that my achievements were treated like expectations, not celebrations. If I did well, that was just what I was supposed to do. If Maris did anything at all, it was proof she was special. The imbalance was never announced. It was just lived. My dad, Hank, never fought my mom on it. He'd sit at the table with his shoulders slightly rounded, eyes down, like he was trying to take up less space. If my mother cut at me with a remark too serious, too distant, too focused on work, he'd mutter something like, "You know how your mom is," as if that ended the conversation. As if my feelings were a storm that could be ignored until it passed. So I adapted. I became the quiet one, the capable one, the one who didn't need anything. And when I finally had a real job and my parents had a real bill, I stepped in without being asked twice. At first they sounded grateful. Then it became normal. Then it became assumed. Which is why when my mother called about their 30th wedding anniversary dinner, I already felt the shape of the conversation before she got to the point. Her voice was sweet in that careful way that always meant she was about to hand me something unpleasant. She talked about how hard it was to plan, how Charleston restaurants book up early, how she wanted everything to be just right. She described the place downtown like she was reading from a brochure, golden lighting, white tablecloths, a private room. And I could picture it instantly, not because I'd been there, but because my mother loves a scene that photographs well. Then she paused. Just long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Zeph," she said, "I need you to understand something. The seating is limited. It's a smaller room. We're keeping it intimate." It didn't hit right away. It landed softly like a snowflake you don't notice until the cold sets in. I held my phone away from my ear and stared at the construction plans on my desk, like the lines might rearrange themselves into something that made this make sense. So I said, because I needed her to say it out loud. "So we're only inviting a few people," she continued, voice gentle, almost apologetic. "Very close family. I hope you won't take it personally. You know I love you. You're just so busy and we had to make choices. Make choices." I could have argued. I could have asked who exactly counted as close family if I didn't. I could have asked how many seats there were and how many people had somehow become more essential than the son paying their mortgage. But I didn't. I heard my own voice come out calm and controlled, like I was managing a delay on a job site. "It's fine," I said. "Have a good night." My mother sounded relieved, like she'd been bracing for a fight, and was grateful I saved her the effort. She said goodbye warmly, the way you do when you think you've handled something cleanly. After I hung up, I sat still for a long time. Not devastated, not crying, just quiet in a way that felt new. The phrase "limited seating" kept echoing, and the longer it echoed, the more familiar it sounded, not as a logistical issue, but as a lifelong excuse. There was always some reason I didn't quite fit. Always some explanation that made the exclusion sound reasonable if you didn't look too closely. About an hour later, my phone lit up again. A message from Maris. "Don't take it personally. You're busy anyway." It was the kind of text that pretends to be kind while sliding the knife in deeper. Like she was offering me comfort from a seat she knew I'd been denied. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then tapped it awake and stared again. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. What was I supposed to say? That it hurt, that it was humiliating, that I was tired of being the ghost who paid to keep their life standing. Instead, I set my phone down and looked around my apartment at the clean counters and the quiet. I realized something cold. Something I didn't want to admit. They didn't forget to invite me. They chose not to. And the worst part was how easily they assumed I'd keep paying anyway. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that maybe it really was about space, that maybe my mother truly had to cut someone. But the question wouldn't leave me alone. If the room was too small for me, who exactly was sitting in my place? And why did I always have a seat in the bills but never at the table? The next day at work, I moved through meetings like I was underwater. I answered questions. I sent emails. I nodded at the right moments, but my mind kept circling the same point the way your tongue keeps finding a sore spot even when it hurts. Limited seating, family only, choices. Tess Navarro noticed before anyone else. Tess sits 2 desks over from me, the kind of co-worker who doesn't gossip, doesn't pry, but somehow always clocks the difference between tired and something else. She caught me staring at my monitor without scrolling the cursor, blinking like it was trying to wake me up. "Coffee?" she asked. Not as a suggestion, as a rescue rope. We walked to a small cafe around the corner, the kind with scratched wooden tables and a steady line of people pretending they aren't desperate. Tess waited until we had our drinks, until the noise around us made it easier to speak without feeling exposed. I told her the basics, that my parents were having their anniversary dinner in Charleston, that I wasn't invited, that my mom said it was because the restaurant room was small. Tess didn't react the way people usually do. She didn't say, "I'm sure she didn't mean it," or "families are complicated," or any of the soft phrases that excuse everything. She just looked at me over the rim of her cup, eyes sharp and steady. "You pay their mortgage, right?" she asked. I hesitated because saying it out loud always made it feel worse. "Yeah," I said. "Mortgage. Taxes too. It started during COVID then. It just kept going." Tess nodded once, like she'd just confirmed something she already knew. "Zeph, she said you're not their son in this arrangement. You're their payment processor." The words hit harder than my mother's call because Tess didn't wrap them in love. She didn't soften them. She didn't pretend. She said it like a fact, the way an engineer points at a crack and tells you the structure is compromised. I gave a short laugh that didn't sound like me. Not because it was funny. Because it was true. And I didn't know what to do with that. "I know," I said quietly. "I've known for a while. I keep thinking maybe it'll change." "It won't." Tess said, not cruel, just honest. "Not if you keep making it easy." We sat in silence for a beat. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop. Someone laughed too loud at another table. Life moved on like my chest wasn't tight. On the walk back to the office, I tried to argue with her in my head. My parents aren't monsters. They're not cartoon villains. My mom isn't evil. My dad isn't violent. They're just people who got used to me being the one who covers the gap. And when you're used to a safety net, you stop looking down. Still, Tess's sentence followed me like a shadow. Payment processor. Not family. Function. That afternoon, I did something I'd done 100 times in other situations. I tried to fix it in the only language I knew my family responded to. Not by confronting them, not by demanding respect, but by being useful. By offering something that could be framed literally and emotionally. I ordered them a gift, nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. A small silver photo frame with a simple engraving, 30 years. I chose it because it felt symbolic. Because I wanted my absence to still be present in some way. I wanted them to open it and think Zeph remembered us. Zeph cares. Maybe next time we make room. I wrote a short card, careful and restrained. "Congratulations. Wishing you both many more happy years." I didn't mention the invitation. I didn't mention the hurt. I wrapped it neatly the way I wrap everything I can't say and shipped it to Charleston with tracking because I like proof when I'm sending parts of myself into places that don't always return them gently. For 2 days, I checked the tracking link more than I should have. "Delivered it," finally said. I pictured my mom setting it on the table beside the other party details, her neat handwriting on place cards, her focus on the image she wanted to create. 3 days after that, I got home from work and found a box sitting outside my apartment door. Same size, same shape, my name on the label, my mother's handwriting on the return address. I didn't even bring it inside right away. I stood there in the hallway, my keys still in my hand, staring like the cardboard might change its mind and turn into something else. When I opened it, the frame was inside untouched. The card was still sealed under the ribbon like it had never belonged to them. On top was a single sheet of paper with my mother's familiar loops. "We already have enough. Please don't waste your money." That was it. No thank you. No apology. No acknowledgement that a son had tried to bridge a gap his parents were widening on purpose. Just a polite dismissal. I held the note for a long time, feeling something sharper than sadness rise up under my ribs. Because the message wasn't really about the frame. It was about space. About whether there was room for me in their life when I wasn't paying for it. That night I ate dinner standing at my kitchen counter because sitting felt too still. I cleaned dishes that weren't even dirty. I reorganized a drawer just to hear something move. Then I sat down at my laptop and did what I do when I feel a threat I can't name. I audited. Not my parents, not my relationship. My systems. My money. My notifications. I opened my email and started sorting the way I always do at work when a project starts to drift. Filter. Flag. Identify risks. I searched for my bank's name and scrolled through months of routine alerts. Payment processed, statement ready, auto-pay confirmation. My eyes skimmed until they caught on something that looked slightly off. Same sender, same logo, but the subject line was formatted differently than the others. Newer. Not urgent sounding, but different enough to snag my attention like a snagged thread. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just stared at it, a faint pulse of unease tapping behind my forehead. And then another memory surfaced, small, but suddenly heavy. A few weeks earlier, my mom had called and asked for a verification code. She'd said she was handling some paperwork for the house and the bank was being annoying with security. I'd been between meetings, distracted, used to solving things quickly. She read numbers off her screen, I read numbers off mine, and I gave her the code without thinking. I remember because she sounded relieved. I remember because I told myself it was harmless. Sitting there in my quiet apartment, the returned gift on my counter like a rejection letter, I felt the shape of that code change in my mind. It wasn't just a convenience anymore. It was a key I might have handed over without checking what door it opened. I closed my laptop and stared into the dark window, my reflection faint against the city lights. I didn't have proof of anything yet. Just a growing, uncomfortable sense that the exclusion wasn't random and the timing wasn't innocent. That my family wasn't only protecting their image. They might have been protecting something else too. Something connected to the house. Something connected to my name. My phone buzzed again with another message from Maris, something shallow about how planning was stressful and Mom didn't mean anything by it. I didn't answer. I didn't even type. For the first time, I let the silence stand without rushing to fill it. If they wanted me gone from the picture, fine. I wouldn't beg to be framed. I wouldn't send another gift. I wouldn't try to earn a seat at a table that didn't want me there. I made a decision that felt calm on the surface and dangerous underneath. On the night of their anniversary dinner, I wasn't going to call. I wasn't going to text. I wasn't going to send a hope you're having fun message that made it easier for them to pretend everything was normal. If they wanted me to disappear, I would. And I would let them face, for once, the part of their life I'd been holding up from 1,000 miles away. I kept my promise to myself. No text, no call, no polite little message that would make it easier for them to pretend we were fine. The day of the dinner, I moved through my apartment like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. I stripped the bed and started laundry even though it didn't need it. I wiped down counters that were already clean. I vacuumed the rug, then vacuumed it again, listening to the steady hum because steady noise felt safer than silence. I made tea, forgot about it, reheated it, then poured it out and made coffee instead. Anything to keep my hands busy. Anything to keep my mind from drifting to Charleston, to a table I hadn't been invited to my mother lifting a glass and calling it family. I avoided looking at the clock. I knew the rough window of the reservation because my mother had mentioned it like it was just logistics, like the time mattered more than the fact that I wasn't welcome. Every time my eyes started to slide toward the microwave display, I forced them away. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was done letting one dinner turn me into a child again. Then my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't pick it up right away. I waited, like maybe if I didn't touch it, whatever was coming couldn't land. But the screen lit again and again, and the glow pulled my eyes the way a siren pulls a ship. A notification from Maris. A new post. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, like it wanted me to feel every second. Downtown Charleston. A restaurant entrance dressed up with warm golden light spilling out onto the sidewalk. A long table visible through the window, white tablecloths, glassware catching the light like tiny flashes. And there they were, my parents at the center hands, close dressed in coordinated white like they'd planned it for the camera. Maris stood near my mother's shoulder, smiling in that bright, polished way she's always had, as if happiness is a performance she can switch on. Around them were relatives I recognized and a couple faces I didn't. People who had room, people who counted. The caption was short, clean, and cruel. Family only. For a moment I just stared. Not because I didn't understand it, but because my body insisted on giving me one last chance to pretend it wasn't real. I scrolled down. Comments flooded the post already. Hearts, congrats. You two are goals. And then my mother's name right there in public, stamped beneath the image like an official seal. So proud of our family. More hearts. More praise. More strangers applauding a picture that didn't include the person paying to keep the picture's background intact. Something in me cooled. Not numb exactly. Precise. Like the part of my brain that takes over on a job site when everyone else is panicking. I didn't feel the need to scream. I didn't even feel the need to argue. I saw it for what it was. They weren't celebrating love. They were staging unity. And in their version of unity, I was disposable as long as the checks kept clearing. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have closed the app and walked away. I could have swallowed it the way I always had. But the thought of staying silent this time felt like agreeing to the lie. It felt like signing my name under the caption myself. So I hit like first. A small motion, almost casual. A quiet way of saying I see you. I see what you're doing. Then I tapped the comment box and my fingers didn't shake. I typed one sentence exactly as it formed in my head, without decoration, without apology. Congrats, mortgage and taxes are all yours now. I posted it and locked my phone. No edits, no second guessing, no follow-up. I set the phone face down on the counter and stood there listening to my own breathing. I expected my heart to race. It didn't. I expected regret to wash over me. It didn't. What I felt was a strange, clean stillness, like I had finally set down something heavy I'd been carrying so long, I forgot it had weight. I washed a mug just to have something to do. The water ran hot over my hands. The apartment was quiet, except for the heater clicking on and off. I told myself that was it, that the sentence was out there and whatever happened next would happen. When I picked the phone back up, it had been 5 minutes. The post was gone. Not buried. Not edited. Gone as if it had never existed. As if they could erase the whole moment the way they'd erased me from their table. And then I saw the calls. The missed call count climbed like a tide. 10, 15, 20, 30. My mother's name over and over until it looked like a glitch. Maris mixed in between. My father once, then twice, both times ending before it could connect because I didn't move. And then numbers I didn't recognize. Out of state. Charleston area codes. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly finding my number. Texts followed the calls, coming in hot, stacked on each other. How could you do this to us? You embarrassed us. You're selfish. You don't air family business online. You've always been cold. Maris's message was shorter, sharper, like she was throwing darts. You ruined everything. You always do this. My mother's was longer, full of wounded disappointment, like she was the victim of my honesty. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us. After all we've done for you. I stared at that line until it felt unreal. I thought of the mortgage payment notification that had buzzed in my pocket that morning while I was fixing someone else's problem. I thought of the escrow transfer, the taxes, the quiet ways I kept their life from collapsing. I thought of the returned gift sitting in my recycling bin because I couldn't bear to look at it. My phone rang again. I watched it vibrate against the countertop. Another unknown number slid across the screen right after, close enough in timing to make my mind catch. It wasn't just family anger moving through the night. Something else was stirring too. Something tied to schedules and accounts and systems that didn't care about feelings. I didn't answer any of it. I didn't argue back. I didn't defend myself. I sat on the edge of my couch with the phone in my hand and let the noise pass through me without grabbing hold. For the first time, my silence wasn't me shrinking. It wasn't me keeping peace. It was me refusing to be pulled back into the role they'd assigned me. Outside my window, Denver was quiet and cold. Headlights slid across the street like slow-moving ribbons. Somewhere in Charleston, they were scrambling, probably still in their white outfits, trying to put the perfect picture back together. But the picture had always been missing something. They'd just finally gotten caught pretending it wasn't. I looked down at the 30 missed calls and understood exactly why they were calling. Not because they missed me. Not because they suddenly realized they'd hurt me. They were calling because I'd touched the one thing they didn't want anyone to see. And if I was right, the next move wouldn't be another guilt-soaked message. It would be pressure. It would be money. It would be paper. I slept badly, waking up every time my phone lit up, not because I planned to answer, but because my body still carried the old reflex to respond. Morning came gray and thin. The first thing I did wasn't brush my teeth or make coffee. I checked my notifications, scanned the names, and set the phone down again. More calls, more texts. No question marks, no "are you okay?" Just demands, accusations, and the same obsession with how it looked. I didn't want a conversation. A conversation would let them turn this into an argument about tone instead of truth. It would give my mother room to cry, and my father room to stay quiet, and my sister room to act shocked and wounded. I'd been in that movie too many times. I knew the ending. So I chose action over noise. I opened my banking app and went straight to the auto-pay schedule. There it was, laid out neatly, the future already planned as if my consent was permanent. Mortgage draft date, escrow payment, a line item for property taxes rolling through the same channel like it always had. I stared at it the way I stare at a structural detail that's been wrong for years, but no one wants to admit it. If I left it alone, they would treat my comment like a tantrum. They'd delete the evidence, call me dramatic, and wait for the next payment to prove I didn't mean it. My thumb hovered for a second, and I could feel the old guilt trying to rise. The voice in my head that sounded like my mother, "Don't be cruel. Don't be dramatic. Don't punish us." Then another voice, quieter but steadier, cut through it. "They already punished you. They just did it politely." I canceled the mortgage auto-pay. I canceled the escrow transfer tied to taxes. For the remaining items I couldn't fully cancel with one tap, I switched them to manual approval. The app asked if I was sure. I hit confirm. A clean little message appeared. Changes saved. I took screenshots of every confirmation page without thinking, the same way I document everything on a project, because documentation is the difference between truth and someone else's story later. I didn't send a warning text. I didn't announce it. I didn't negotiate. I knew if I explained it would become a debate, and debates are how they win. They talk until you're exhausted, then they frame your exhaustion as proof you're wrong. I went to work like it was any other day. I sat through a meeting and answered questions about materials and deadlines. I smiled at the right moments. But my phone kept lighting up on the desk beside my keyboard, and when I finally checked it during a break, the tone had shifted. They weren't calling privately anymore. They were recruiting. My mother's first long text read like a sermon. She told me I had humiliated the family. She said I was ungrateful. She said I had no right to turn a special night into public shame. She wrote about loyalty and respect, as if respect is something she ever offered me without a bill attached. She ended with the familiar weapon she loved most: "I didn't raise you to be this kind of person." Maris's message was smaller but sharper. "You always have to make everything about you. You ruined Mom's night. You love being the victim." Then I opened the app again and saw what she'd done next. A public post, vague enough to deny, specific enough to aim. Something about children who forget their parents. Something about cold hearts. A photo of her holding my mother's hand, both of them posed like a charity campaign. No names, no details, just a clean little narrative designed to pull sympathy. People poured into the comments with predictable lines. "Stay strong. Some kids don't deserve parents. Family is everything, Maris replied with hearts and sad faces feeding the story. Within an hour, the calls from unknown numbers doubled. Aunts, uncles, cousins. People who hadn't said my name in a year suddenly acting like they'd been personally wounded. The message was always the same, dressed in different voices. They're your parents. Don't keep score. It's just money. You'll regret this. Stop being petty. You don't do this to family. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so transparent. Nobody asked what happened. Nobody asked why I'd written what I wrote. They didn't want context. They wanted compliance. They wanted me back in my place, quietly paying while everyone else sat under warm lights pretending the family was whole. By late morning, my work phone rang and the receptionist transferred the call to my desk with a tone that was already tense. A woman's voice came through, clipped and demanding. She said she was trying to reach Beck Calder. She said it was urgent family business. She asked for my direct extension and my schedule, like my time belonged to her. I hung up without giving anything and walked straight to my boss's office before the story could arrive without me. Miles Keene looked up from his screen, brows pinched, already irritated at the interruption. He didn't snap at me. Miles isn't that kind of boss. But he was blunt. Someone called here looking for you, he said. Said their family. They sounded intense. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face steady. I'm handling it, I said. Miles leaned back. Handle it off company lines, he replied. I don't care what's going on at home, Zeph. But I do care if it spills into a client call or a site meeting. We can't have distractions. I nodded. I understood the warning for what it was. Not cruelty. Reality. My family was testing whether they could reach me through the one thing I'd built that had nothing to do with them. They were trying to make my life in Denver uncomfortable enough that I'd crawl back to the role they preferred. When I got back to my desk, Tess was waiting by the divider, her eyes tracking my expression like she could read the whole situation without me saying a word. They called your job, didn't they? She said. I didn't ask how she knew. I just exhaled. Yeah. Tess didn't look surprised. Screenshot everything she told me. Every text, every post, every voicemail. Don't respond emotionally, don't give them material. She paused, then lowered her voice. And check your accounts. Your email. Your bank settings. People don't panic like that just because you hurt their feelings. They panic when you're close to something they don't want you to see. That line stuck because it matched what I'd felt the night before when the post disappeared so fast. They weren't afraid of my sadness. They were afraid of exposure. That evening back in my apartment, I lined everything up the way I always do when I'm trying to understand a failure. I put my phone on the table. I opened my laptop. I created a folder and started saving screenshots, naming them with dates like evidence. I didn't let myself spiral. I stayed methodical. I changed passwords. I checked connected devices. I tightened settings I hadn't looked at in years because I'd assumed family meant safe. Then I opened my email and typed my bank's name into the search bar. A long list of routine messages appeared, most of them identical in tone and format, the kind you stop reading because they never change. But buried among them was that one subject line I'd noticed in the days before, the one that looked slightly different. Newer. Cleaner. Not alarming on its face, just unfamiliar enough to feel wrong. I hovered over it, my cursor still, my breathing slow. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant signals. Somewhere in Charleston, they were still telling their version of me to anyone who would listen. Somewhere, they were still assuming I'd fold. I clicked into the inbox view and stared at the email header without opening it yet because part of me already knew. Whatever was inside wasn't going to be another reminder or a harmless receipt. It was going to be proof that this wasn't only about a dinner I didn't attend. It was about what I'd been paying for and what they'd been doing while I paid. I clicked the email. I told myself to stay calm, to treat it like any other document that needed reviewing, but my pulse still thudded in my throat as the message opened. It was automated, the kind of templated language banks use when they want something to sound routine. Subject line: confirmation. Inside, a polite summary, a reference number, and an attached PDF with a name that made my stomach tilt. Refinance agreement. I didn't open it right away. I read the email twice, scanning for any hint that it was a mistake. It didn't look like spam. The sender was right. The formatting was right. My name was right. Too right. That uneasy feeling Tess had named for me got heavier, like the room itself had thickened. I sat at my kitchen table in Denver with the laptop open and my phone beside it face down, still buzzing every few minutes from Charleston. I could hear my mother's voice in my head even without answering. "You're tearing the family apart. You're dramatic. You're selfish." I ignored all of it and opened the PDF. The first page loaded and my breath stopped. It wasn't an estimate. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a finalized document. My parents' address in Charleston, my father's name, my mother's name, and then mine printed cleanly where it did not belong, listed in a role that carried weight: responsibility, liability, borrower, guarantor, authorized signer. The exact label didn't matter as much as what it meant I was on the hook. I scrolled almost numb, watching my name appear again in the signature section. Not a handwritten signature, but an electronic one. Beck Calder. Timestamp. Verification complete. A box checked. Another box checked. It was so clinical it felt unreal, like a file somebody had copied and pasted my identity into. For a full minute I just stared at the screen. Then my body reacted like it finally caught up. My hands went cold. My chest tightened. I stood up fast enough that the chair legs scraped the floor, a sharp sound in my quiet apartment. I needed something tangible. Something that proved I wasn't imagining it. I walked to my mailbox in the hallway, half expecting the world to shift back into place if I just kept moving. Inside was a thick envelope with my bank's logo in the corner, the kind of heavy paper that meant official. It shouldn't have been in my box. Anything tied to that Charleston house should have gone to Charleston. But there it was, addressed to me in Denver, as if the system already understood what my family had been doing. I brought it inside and tore it open at the counter. The first page hit me like a slap. My name in bold. Not as a courtesy, as an obligation. The letter wasn't a late notice the way I'd assumed when my mother started texting about the bank calling. It was a notification related to the refinance, with figures that were larger than the original mortgage terms, that were riskier. The kind of numbers that can swallow a life if you're not ready. I read it twice, then a third time, because part of my brain still believed there had to be a typo somewhere that would save me. There wasn't. I called the bank immediately. After a few transfers, a calm voice came on the line. "This is Jonah Pike. How can I help you today?" I gave my name. I gave the reference number from the letter. I heard the faint clicking of keys as he pulled it up. "Yes, Mr. Calder," Jonah said. "I see the account. My name is on a refinance agreement for a property in Charleston." I said, keeping my voice level by force. "I did not sign anything. I did not authorize anything. I need you to tell me what happened." There was a pause that felt like someone setting down a cup carefully. "The refinance was processed earlier this year," Jonah said. "The primary borrowers are Hank and Darlene Calder. Your signature appears as an authorized party." "What month?" I asked. "July," he said, and that single word made the air in my kitchen feel sharper. Summer. While I was working 12-hour days and paying their mortgage on schedule. While I was still sending money like a fool who thought he was helping. "I never signed," I repeated. "I need the documents. I need the exact timestamps. I need the authentication method. I need the access history. I need to know how my name was used." Jonah's tone didn't change, but it grew more careful. "We do have electronic copies on file. The signature appears consistent with prior authorizations." "Consistent," I echoed, and my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. "Because someone used the same credentials." "I can't provide full access logs over the phone," Jonah said. "If you're alleging unauthorized activity, we can initiate a dispute and a fraud review. That process allows us to gather and share more detail through formal channels." "Start it," I said. He asked me a series of questions that felt like stepping into a different world. "When did you become aware? Do you recognize the transaction amount? Have you shared access with anyone? Have you ever provided verification codes?" Each question was a hammer. Each one drove the point deeper. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was about the legal perimeter of my life. When he asked about verification codes, my throat went tight. I remembered my mother's casual request, the way she'd acted mildly annoyed by security measures, the way I'd given her the code like I was passing salt across a table. I didn't say that yet. I wasn't ready to hear it out loud. I need this documented, I said instead. Email me confirmation of this call. Give me a case number. Tell me exactly what you need from me. Jonah agreed. He gave me a reference ID and an email address for the disputes department. He listed the requested items: government ID, a written statement, copies of the documents, any related communications. He promised an email within the hour. When I hung up, my phone lit up again with another message from my mother, as if she could feel the direction my attention had turned. We need to talk. Please. You're taking this too far. I didn't answer. I opened my email and started searching deeper. I looked for anything from the bank around July. My inbox filled with the usual autopay confirmations and statement notices. Then I found another automated message I'd ignored months ago because the subject line looked like all the other routine junk. Confirmation. Action required. It had seemed harmless in the moment. Now it glowed like a warning sign I'd walked past. I opened that older email and pulled up its attached PDF. The file showed the verification steps that had been completed. 2 separate confirmations recorded within minutes. 2 approvals. 2 checks. The timing was too tight to be accidental. It wasn't the slow, messy timeline of a misunderstanding. It was the clean efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and was prepared to do it quickly before questions could surface. My mind jumped back to that phone call from my mother a few weeks before the dinner. The one where she asked for the verification code. She'd said it was for paperwork for convenience for the house. I had been distracted. I had been trained to help, and I had handed her the key. I sat there staring at the PDF, and the pattern rearranged itself into something uglier. The exclusion from the dinner, the returned gift, the public photo, the frantic scramble to delete my comment, the 30 missed calls, the sudden moral posts about ungrateful children. It wasn't just about control. It was a screen. A performance meant to keep me focused on shame and emotion while something real lived in the paperwork. I started printing everything. Page 1 of the refinance, signature page, verification page, the bank letter, the email headers. I spread the papers across my table and marked the dates with a pen circling July until the ink bled into the paper fibers. I opened my phone and scrolled back through my messages, taking screenshots of anything that mentioned paperwork emails from the bank codes urgent. I saved them into a folder on my laptop, labeled by date like a case file. By midnight, my kitchen table didn't look like a home. It looked like an investigation. And underneath the anger, something else settled in clarity. For 3 years, I'd told myself I was supporting my parents. On paper, they had turned me into their liability. They had been taking my money with one hand while using my identity with the other. Whatever this was, it wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. A planned one. I stared at the signature line again, my name stamped into a document I'd never touched, and the thought that came was simple and terrifying. If I didn't handle this by procedure, by the book right now, everything I'd built in Denver could be pulled down by a debt that wasn't mine. The next morning, Jonah's email arrived exactly when he said it would. Polite language, reference number, a clear list of what to submit and where. It felt surreal getting professionalism and order from a stranger while my own family spiraled into chaos. I replied immediately, attaching what I already had, and told him I would follow with a formal written statement by end of day. I asked for confirmation once it was received, and for the earliest possible timeline on the fraud review steps. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I secured myself. I changed my email password first. Not a minor change. A full reset, something long and new and impossible to guess. I enabled stronger 2-factor settings, replaced old backup codes, and checked the device list. There were phones and laptops I recognized, and there was one entry that made my stomach flip: an old device that didn't match what I owned now. I revoked it immediately. I tightened every privacy setting like I was sealing a house against a storm. I went into the bank portal and removed any remembered devices, any saved authorizations, anything that had ever been left open because it was easier. Easier was what had gotten me here. I closed the access I had once shared for convenience, the kind of shared setup I'd justified because it was my dad, because it was family, because I thought the worst thing they could do was ask for too much. I set alerts to notify me of every login attempt, every change, every request. Then I pulled my credit report. My hands were steady, but my mind was loud. I scanned for inquiries I didn't recognize, for new accounts, for anything that suggested the refinance wasn't the only place my name had been dragged. The report showed a recent inquiry connected to the refinance timeline, something I hadn't initiated. Seeing it listed there as a cold record made the situation feel even more real. This wasn't a family fight. It was a footprint. While I was doing all of that, my phone kept lighting up with Charleston. My mother's messages changed tone when she realized I wasn't folding. They moved from outrage to fear, and fear to threats disguised as heartbreak. "You're putting us on the street. Do you want us to lose everything? Do you want the neighbors to laugh? Do you want your father to have a heart attack over this?" Each line was engineered to drag me back into the role of rescuer, to make me responsible for consequences that were born from their choices. Maris escalated in a different way. "If you don't stop this, I'm going to tell people what you're really like. You think you're so perfect, but I can ruin your image too." She followed it with another public post, vague but venomous, suggesting that some people care more about money than blood. Comments poured in again like a pile on strangers, offering moral judgments without a shred of context. It was ugly, but it was also predictable. Maris didn't have facts. She had narrative. She'd always had narrative. By midday, the pressure hit my workplace again. An email came into a general company inbox that HR flagged, then forwarded to Miles. I wasn't shown the entire message at first, but Miles summarized it in his office with a tight jaw. Someone claiming to be family had contacted the company to report that I was abandoning my parents and acting erratically, suggesting the company should intervene. The language was crafted to sound concerned, like a welfare check wrapped in a reputation attack. Miles looked at me for a long moment. "I'm not asking for your personal life," he said, "but I need to know whether this is going to keep happening." My palms were damp, but my voice stayed calm. "I'm dealing with a financial dispute involving identity misuse," I said carefully. "It's being handled through the bank. I have documentation. I'm also taking steps to prevent further harassment." The words felt heavy in my mouth, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. Identity misuse, documentation, harassment. Those were not words I ever expected to use in the same sentence as my parents. Miles nodded once, slowly, like he was absorbing the seriousness. "Keep it away from here," he said. "And if they contact us again, we'll route it through HR. You focus on your work." I walked back to my desk, feeling both exposed and oddly steadier. My family's strategy was clear now. They couldn't pull me back with guilt alone, so they were trying to isolate me, shame me, pressure me in public spaces where I had something to lose. They were trying to turn me into the villain loudly enough that I would choose silence just to make it stop. Tess caught me as I sat down. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. "They're escalating," she said. "Yeah," I replied. She leaned in slightly. "Good," she said, and when I looked at her like she'd lost her mind, she added, "It means you're close. People don't fight this hard when they're innocent. They fight this hard when they need you quiet." That night, Jonah sent a brief update. He couldn't provide full logs yet, but he confirmed the refinance file contained 2 verification entries within minutes, completed through the online portal tied to my credentials. He noted the timestamps and the channel used. He wrote it politely, but the implication was sharp. The approvals came through the exact pathway I had once left open for convenience. I pulled up my message history again and searched for the day my mother had asked for that code. I found it. Her casual request. My quick reply with the numbers. The timestamp of that text sat too close to the verification time in the refinance PDF for coincidence. My stomach turned, not from surprise anymore, but from the sting of seeing my own trust recorded as evidence. I started building a clean package the way I build a project binder. A timeline with dates and times. A folder of screenshots labeled and ordered, PDFs printed and highlighted, notes on who contacted my employer and when, a list of every payment I'd made for 3 years with corresponding bank confirmations. I wasn't doing it to be dramatic. I was doing it because systems only respect what can be proven. Around midnight, Tess texted me one line, "You need a lawyer." I knew she was right. Even if the bank corrected the record, I needed someone who spoke the language of liability and procedure better than I did, someone who could block the next move my family might try. I searched quietly, methodically, and found a name that kept appearing in reputable places for real estate fraud and electronic authorization disputes: Harper Sloan. I drafted an email to Harper with a short summary and attached my timeline index, not the whole file, yet just enough to show the shape of the situation. I kept it clinical. I requested a consult. I hit send. Then I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the stack of papers spread out under the harsh overhead light. The same table where I'd once eaten dinners alone, telling myself independence was strength. Now it held the record of how my own family had used that independence as a resource to exploit. My phone buzzed again with a new message from my mother. One sentence stripped of softness. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. I didn't even feel the urge to. The threat wasn't new. It was just the mask dropping. I turned the phone over and stared at the folder on my laptop, the one labeled with dates and proof. And I understood that I had crossed a line they couldn't drag me back across. This had started with a dinner invitation withheld behind polite words. It had become a fight over my name, my finances, and my right to exist without being treated like a tool. And now that I had the documents, now that I had a case number, now that I had a lawyer email in my sent folder, I knew what came next wouldn't be a shouting match. It would be a confrontation built from evidence, not emotion. The night before I flew to Charleston, my apartment in Denver looked like a small war room dressed up as a kitchen. Papers covered the table in clean stacks, each one labeled in my handwriting, each one clipped and ordered the way I'd order a project submittal. I wasn't doing it to be dramatic. I was doing it because drama is how my family survived accountability. Facts were the only thing they couldn't talk their way around. I built the timeline down to the hour. The day my mother called and told me the restaurant had limited seating. The day I ordered the engraved frame and mailed it. The day it came back to my door unopened with her note telling me not to waste my money. The anniversary night itself, the exact minute Maris posted the photo in downtown Charleston under those warm golden lights, the second I hit, like the moment I typed "Congrats, mortgage and taxes are all yours now," and the 5-minute gap before the post vanished like it had never existed, the 30 missed calls that followed, the next day when I canceled autopay, the day the thick bank envelope showed up in my Denver mailbox with my name printed in bold, the refinance PDF with the July timestamp, the verification entries completed minutes apart, and the texts from my mother asking for a code for the house paperwork sitting right where they belonged in the timeline like a fingerprint. I printed 2 full copies. One to take into the meeting, one to leave untouched for my lawyer and the bank in case the first set ended up lost the way my presence had been lost from family photos all my life. Harper Sloan called around 9 that night. Her voice was calm, the kind of calm you pay for because you're tired of living inside someone else's chaos. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She asked questions in a straight line. Who has had access? When did you become aware? What communication do you have? How did they attempt to contact your employer? What proof shows you did not consent? I answered the way I answer on job sites when something's gone wrong, short, clear, no extra emotion. When I finished, Harper laid out the rules. "You are not going to debate morality," she said. "You are not going to argue about gratitude or family values. You are going to state facts. If they deny, we proceed through documentation and bank records. If they admit, we document that too. Either way, you do not negotiate verbally. Everything goes in writing." She told me she had 2 letters ready. One was a formal notice of dispute and representation. The other demanded they stop contacting me and stop contacting my workplace. If they keep calling your office, Harper said, it becomes a different problem. Document it. Save everything. Don't respond with anything you don't want read aloud later. After we hung up, I sat alone at my table and listened to the quiet. My phone buzzed every few minutes, but I didn't touch it. I didn't need to read another message telling me I was destroying the family. I had the bank's letter telling me they'd already tried to destroy me on paper. Maris texted just after midnight. The tone was noticeably softer than the messages she'd been sending since the anniversary dinner, like she'd suddenly remembered how to act reasonable. "Can we meet for brunch and talk this out? Mom wants to fix it. Just us. No drama. No drama." That phrase could have been printed on my mother's place cards. It meant don't make us face consequences in public. It meant come back under our roof so we can control the air you breathe. I replied with one sentence. Where and when? Maris answered with a cafe name in downtown Charleston and a time. I didn't mention Harper. I didn't mention the folder. I didn't mention the dispute case number. I let them believe they were pulling me into a family talk. I wanted them to walk in thinking words could still fix this because that was the only way they would show their real hand. The airport the next morning was all bright floors and rolling suitcases and people moving with purpose. I moved with purpose too, but mine didn't feel like travel. It felt like stepping toward a point that had been waiting for me for years. On the plane, I stared out at clouds and kept my hands folded in my lap like I was keeping them from shaking. They didn't shake. I wasn't scared of my family the way I used to be. I was tired of them. That was different. That was stronger. In Charleston, the air was softer than Denver's damp, with that coastal weight that makes everything smell like old wood and salt and blooming plants. The cafe sat on a corner with tall windows and warm light, the kind of place people choose when they want a conversation to look friendly from the outside. I arrived early. I chose a table near the window, ordered water, and set my folder down beside the glass like a quiet boundary. They came in together, all three of them, which told me immediately that just us had been another lie. My mother was dressed like she was going to church, pressed coordinated hair, perfect lipstick, careful. Maris walked beside her, face arranged into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father followed behind, shoulders slightly hunched, hands empty, looking at the floor like he was hoping the tile would open up and swallow him. They slid into the seats across from me. My mother reached for my hand as if touch could rewrite what she'd done. I pulled my hand back calmly and rested it on the folder. "Zeph," she said, voice soft, almost pleading. "We're glad you came. This has gotten out of hand." Maris nodded. "We just need to clear the air. Everybody's upset. People are talking." My father said nothing. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the folder. He stared at the menu like it was a shield. My mother leaned forward slightly. "You took something private and made it public," she said. "That comment on Maris's post, do you have any idea what that did to us?" "People saw it." I didn't respond to the accusation. I didn't defend the comment. I didn't apologize for telling the truth. I opened the folder and slid one page across the table, turning it so it faced them. My name sat in bold where it had no right to be. "I didn't sign this," I said. One sentence. Flat. Final. "You used my name for a refinance." Maris's smile faltered for half a second before she caught it. "That's not," she started, then looked at my mother. "That's not what happened. Banks mess up all the time." My mother's eyes flicked down to the paper, then back up fast, as if looking too long would make it real. "Zeph, honey, you're misunderstanding," she said. "It was just paperwork. A technical thing. We didn't think you didn't think I'd find out," I said, still calm. I slid the next page across the signature section with the timestamp and verification marks. This says verification was completed in July, twice, minutes apart. I didn't do that. Maris exhaled hard through her nose like she was annoyed at the bank for not playing along. "Okay, but electronic signatures, people get hacked, emails get spoofed. You can't just accuse Mom and Dad." I looked at her. "You mean the email that came through my account?" I said, keeping my voice even. "The one with the PDF attached?" Her face changed. Not dramatically, not enough for a stranger to notice, but enough for me. She'd said it without thinking. The word email landed in the space between us like a dropped object. My mother's eyes cut toward Maris sharp for the first time since they walked in. Maris tried to recover. I'm saying the bank sends emails. It's not proof of anything. It's proof of the process, I said. And I have more. My mother's voice tightened. Zeph, please. Don't do this here. Here. Public. With witnesses. With windows. With the possibility that someone might recognize them. My mother's entire life was built around controlling what here looked like. I pulled my phone out and placed it on the table screen facing up. I didn't wave it around. I didn't threaten. I just tapped a file and hit play. My mother's voice filled the space between the clink of cups and the low murmur of other conversations. The recording was an old voicemail she'd left when the bank first started calling about missed payments after I canceled auto pay. Her tone in the voicemail wasn't loving. It was urgent, irritated, entitled. The bank keeps calling Zeph. We need you to handle it. You know we can't lose the house. You'll take care of it, right? The color drained from her face. Maris stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. My father's jaw tightened, but he still didn't speak. I ended the recording and set the phone down again. That voicemail came after I stopped paying, I said. But the refinance was in July. And in July you asked me for a verification code. You told me it was for house paperwork. I gave it to you. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands moved under the table like she was trying to gather herself together. Maris leaned forward, voice suddenly harder. So what, you're punishing them? Because you're mad about an invitation, you're taking a family issue and turning it into something else. It was already something else, I said. I was paying the mortgage while my name was being used to take on more debt. That's not a family issue. That's my financial life. My mother's eyes flashed. We did what we had to do, she said, and the softness was gone. We were trying to keep everything together. The house, the family, all of it. You don't understand what it's like to be at risk of losing everything. I stared at her, waiting for the part where she said she was sorry. It didn't come. You were not keeping the house together, I said. You were keeping the image together. That's why I wasn't invited. That's why the post said family only. That's why it disappeared in 5 minutes. You didn't want anyone connecting the smiles to the bills. Maris scoffed. You always think you're the hero. Like you're the only one who's ever helped. I didn't take the bait. I turned another page and pointed at a line item in the refinance documents, a portion that showed disbursement. There's a cash-out portion, I said. Money didn't just go to the original loan balance, it went somewhere else. My mother's face tightened, a muscle jumping near her jaw. Maris's eyes dropped to the paper too quickly, then snapped away. My father finally looked up just briefly, and his expression wasn't surprise. It was resignation. Like a man watching a bridge collapse after months of hearing the beams creak. I gathered the papers back into the folder slowly. Here's what's happening, I said. I opened a dispute and a fraud review with the bank. My lawyer is involved. I canceled auto pay. I'm done funding this. From now on, any communication goes through Harper Sloan or through writing. If you contact my workplace again, it will be documented and handled through my attorney. My mother's voice rose a notch. You hired a lawyer against your own parents. You used my name without my consent, I said. That's why there's a lawyer. Maris's tone sharpened into a threat dressed as confidence. If you do this, I'll tell everyone the kind of person you are. You think you're untouchable because you have a job in Denver. You're not. My mother leaned in, eyes bright with anger now, not sadness. You didn't have to humiliate us, she said. You didn't have to blow up our lives. I placed cash on the table for my water and slid the folder into my bag. You blew up your own life when you decided I was a tool, I said. I'm just not holding it together anymore. My father still didn't speak. He didn't ask me to stay. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't even deny it. He just sat there, shoulders heavy, letting my mother and sister fight for the story they wanted. That silence was louder than any confession. I walked out into Charleston's humid air and didn't look back through the window. On the sidewalk, my phone buzzed with a new email from Harper. She'd sent the formal notice and the cease contact letter, clean language, firm boundaries. The kind of paper that doesn't care how many times someone says, but we're family. As I headed toward my rental car, the reality settled in. The next step wasn't an argument. It was consequence. And whatever happened to that house in Charleston was no longer mine to rescue. Back in Denver, the process moved in slow official steps the way systems move when they're built to withstand lies. Jonah confirmed that the dispute had been escalated to the fraud review team. Certain activity on the account was restricted while they investigated. They weren't going to tell me everything immediately, but even the language of the email shifted. Less customer service, more procedure, more weight. A week later, Jonah sent a summary that made my stomach knot and my mind go quiet at the same time. Access logs tied to the online portal showed verification actions completed from a device type and location consistent with Charleston. It wasn't a vague possibility anymore. It was a pattern, a trail. The bank couldn't accuse my parents in an email, but the data didn't need to raise its voice. It simply existed. Harper worked 2 tracks at once. One was my protection, removing my name from liability and ensuring I wasn't responsible for payments, fees, or penalties tied to an agreement I did not authorize. The other track was accountability, documenting who benefited from the refinance, who initiated it, and who participated in completing the verification steps. Harper's letters were controlled and sharp. She included the record of my parents contacting my workplace. She instructed them to stop. She warned that continued harassment would be addressed formally. She didn't ask for cooperation. She demanded compliance. Then the disbursement documentation arrived. I remember staring at the page because it made everything click into place with a kind of sick simplicity. The refinance wasn't only to save the house. There was a cash-out distribution rooted beyond the original mortgage balance, and the destination wasn't mysterious once I saw it. A portion went to cover immediate arrears and fees, yes, but another portion was directed toward obligations that had nothing to do with keeping the roof over my parents' heads. A cluster of high-interest credit accounts, a personal debt that traced back to Maris's name and address history, a fire that needed money fast. It explained the urgency. It explained why my mother asked for that verification code like it was nothing. It explained why the dinner photo mattered so much, why the caption had to say family only, why my comment had to be erased in 5 minutes. They didn't just want to look united. They needed people to believe the house was stable, the parents were respectable, the family was fine, because if anyone looked too closely, the story didn't hold. Once the bank put restrictions in place and the dispute moved forward, the pressure in Charleston didn't vanish. It redirected. My mother's messages started arriving less often, but when they came, they were harsher. She stopped pretending this was about love and started treating it like war. Do you want us homeless? Do you want the neighbors to point? You're ruining everything we built. It would have been almost poetic if it hadn't been so cruel. Everything they built. Built on my payments, built on my silence, built on the assumption that I'd keep fixing problems they created. The HOA notices started showing up in my email too, forwarded by Jonah as part of the evolving record because my name had been attached to the property in ways I hadn't fully understood until the refinance paperwork surfaced. Late fees, warnings, formal language about violations and delinquency. The neighborhood gossip followed right behind, not in words I heard directly, but in the shape of my mother's panic. She cared more about the whispers than the fraud. She cared more about the front porch lights being seen than the fact that she'd used my identity to keep them on. Maris disappeared online. Her posts stopped. The moral speeches about ungrateful children vanished. Friends who had been loud in her comments went quiet. She scrubbed photos, locked down her profile, tried to turn off the record the way she'd deleted the anniversary post. But a digital footprint doesn't care about guilt. The bank had what it needed. Harper had what she needed. The timeline existed whether Maris wanted it to or not. By early winter, the house in Charleston started to slide toward the outcome my mother had always feared and that I had always prevented. Without my auto-pay, payments fell behind. With the fraud review underway, my parents couldn't simply lean on my name to restructure their way out again. The bank moved the property into a more aggressive status and notices became more direct. Default language, acceleration clauses, next steps. The first time I drove past the house again months later, I didn't stop. I didn't pull into the driveway. I passed like a stranger in a car, and that hurt in a dull way I didn't expect. The porch looked smaller than my memory. The yard, once manicured by my mother like a stage, looked tired, and on the sign out front a bright sticker sat like a final stamp bank-owned. I didn't feel victory. I felt gravity. The kind you feel when a building fails exactly the way the engineers warned it would because someone kept ignoring the load. Not long after that, Harper forwarded me a document that confirmed my role was officially severed from the fraudulent obligation. The language was dry, court-adjacent, even if it never went to a full public trial. It stated that my authorization had been misused, that the electronic signature process had been completed without my consent. That liability was reassigned away from me and back to the originating borrowers and responsible parties. Reading those lines, I didn't smile. I exhaled. My body released something it had been gripping since the moment I saw my name on that first page. Jonah sent a short message the same day. Case resolved on our end. You are no longer associated with the refinance liability. I wish you the best. I replied with 2 words. Thank you. At work, I walked into Miles's office and told him it was handled. I didn't give a speech. I didn't ask for pity. I told him the situation had been resolved through formal channels and it would not spill into the company again. Miles nodded, and that was that. My life in Denver returned to what it always had been. Deadlines, drawings, meetings, quiet competence. Except now my phone wasn't a leash. It was just a phone. Tess met me after work the day everything finalized. We sat in the same cafe where she'd first called my situation what it was. She didn't celebrate loudly. She just looked at me and said, "You did it." I should have done it sooner, I admitted. She shook her head. You did it when you were ready to stop being used. That's the point. In February, I made a choice that had nothing to do with my parents and everything to do with me. I moved to Santa Fe, not because I was running, because I wanted a life with space, with light, with a pace that didn't make me feel like I was always bracing for impact. I found a small apartment with clean lines and big windows. I bought secondhand furniture and assembled it myself. Screws in my palm, music low, no one demanding access to my accounts, no one asking for codes, no one telling me my worth was measured in what I could cover. I reset my rules, no shared logins, no for convenience, no financial ties that required me to sacrifice safety for the illusion of closeness. Boundaries weren't a punishment, they were a structure. The kind of structure that keeps a life standing. One evening, unpacking a box I'd carried from Denver, I found an old family photo. All of us on the porch of that Charleston house years ago. My mother smiling brightly, my father standing stiff, Maris leaning in like she owned the frame, and me slightly off to the side, close enough to be included, not close enough to matter. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't rip it. I didn't burn it. I didn't do anything theatrical. I slid it back into the envelope and placed it in the back of a drawer. The past could stay there, documented, contained, not ruling my present. My mother called once after everything was done. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but the message hadn't changed. You didn't have to destroy us, she said. You could have helped. I held the phone away from my ear and looked out at the Santa Fe sky, pale and wide, the kind of sky that makes you feel how small other people's control really is. I didn't argue. I didn't list the facts again. I didn't beg her to understand. I said one thing. I did help. For years. You chose what to do with it. Then I ended the call. That was the real ending. Not the bank letter. Not the court language, not the sign in the yard. The ending was me realizing some stories don't close with an apology. They close when you stop volunteering to be hurt. And standing in my quiet apartment with my own furniture and my own rules and no emergency buzzing on my table, one thought settled in clean and certain. Peace was the most expensive thing I ever bought. I